All right, let's dive right in, shall we? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the mind of Immanuel Kant.
Oh, a fantastic choice. Kant's work is always a rewarding challenge.
It definitely is. We'll be working with selections from some of his key texts, like the Critique of Judgment.
Of course, a cornerstone of his aesthetic philosophy.
And we can't forget the Critique of Pure Reason.
Right, where he lays out his entire system of thought, groundbreaking stuff.
And to round things out, we've also got the fundamental principles of the metaphysic of morals, metaphysical elements of ethics, and the science of right.
Quite the selection. It seems we'll be exploring the full spectrum of Kant's ideas. Beauty, purpose, morality, even politics.
Exactly. We're on a mission here, to distill these dense, intricate ideas and, well, make them a little more digestible, a little more down to earth.
A worthy mission indeed. Kant often gets a reputation for being, well, difficult.
That's putting it mildly. But the truth is, his ideas are incredibly relevant, even today.
Absolutely. He wasn't just trying to understand, the world around us, but the very structure of human reason itself.
So, how we think, how we make judgments, how we decide what's right and wrong.
Exactly. He wrestled with some of life's deepest questions, and that's why his work often feels so, well, dense.
Right. It's like every sentence is packed with layers of meaning, but that's also what makes it so rewarding to unpack.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most fascinating places to start is with Kant's idea of a good will.
Oh, yes, in the Metaphysics of Morals. He makes this bold statement that a good will is the only thing inherently good, even more than intelligence or happiness.
Exactly. Now, that might seem counterintuitive at first.
It definitely challenges our conventional thinking. Most people would probably say that happiness is, well, good.
But Kant argues that the true moral worth of any action lies in the intention behind it, not just the outcome.
So you could do something that appears good, but if your motives are selfish, it doesn't have the same moral value.
Right. For Kant, a good will acts out of duty, out of a sense of moral obligation. And this is where he introduces this really important principle, the categorical imperative.
Now that sounds intimidating. The categorical imperative. Can you break that down for us?
Well, it's essentially a test, you could say, to determine if your actions are morally sound. It goes like this. You should only act according to principles that you could rationally will to become universal laws.
So it's not just about what's good for me, but what would be good if everyone did it.
Exactly. So before you make a decision, you ask yourself, what if everyone acted this way? Would it make the world a better place, or would it lead to chaos?
That's a good question to ask yourself. So, for example, if I'm thinking about telling a little white lie to avoid an awkward situation,
Using the categorical imperative, you'd have to consider what would happen if everyone started telling white lies whenever it was convenient.
right, if everyone did that, trust would break down and society wouldn't function very well.
Exactly. So the categorical imperative helps us move beyond our immediate self-interest and think about the broader consequences of our actions.
It encourages us to be more responsible, more ethical in our decision making. And this leads to another key concept in Kant, the kingdom of ends. What did he mean by that?
Well, Kant envisioned a world, a society, where every rational being acts in a way that contributes to the well-being of all. A world where everyone is treated as an end in themselves, never simply as a means to an end.
So, no manipulating or exploiting others, even if it's for your own benefit.
Right, because for Kant, that undermines their inherent worth as rational beings.
Everyone deserves respect simply by virtue of being human. So, our listeners might want to ask themselves, am I treating others with that same respect, or am I using them as stepping stones to get what I want?
That's a great point. Now, we've been talking a lot about morality.
Yeah, goodwill, duty, the categorical imperative, heavy stuff. But this deep dive isn't just about ethics, right? We're also exploring Kant's ideas on beauty, which seems like a big jump. How do we go from universal moral laws to appreciating something like a stunning sunset or a beautiful piece of music?
Well, that's where Kant's critique of judgment comes in. He makes a clear distinction between judgments of beauty and judgments of the good.
So something can be beautiful even if it's not morally good.
Right. When we experience beauty, we feel delight without needing to understand the object's purpose or function.
So I could find a chair aesthetically pleasing even if it's uncomfortable to sit on.
Precisely. You're appreciating its form, its design, not its utility. Kant called this purposiveness without a purpose.
That's interesting. So a beautiful object seems designed even if it doesn't have a specific function.
Exactly. And this applies to all kinds of things. Natural wonders like a mountain range or a starry sky, works of art, music, even mathematical equations.
It's like we're appreciating the form, the structure, the way things fit together, rather than what they're used for.
That's a great way to put it. And Kant goes even further, arguing that our judgments of beauty should be universally valid.
So it's not just about my personal taste.
No, he believed that there's a shared human capacity to appreciate beauty. He called this common sense.
Not common sense in the everyday sense.
Right, not like look both ways before crossing the street, but a shared faculty that allows us to communicate and judge beauty.
So we can have disagreements about what's beautiful, but there's still some underlying common ground.
Exactly. And that's what makes aesthetic judgments so fascinating. They're both subjective and universal at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, Kant also explored those experiences where beauty becomes overwhelming, leading to a feeling he called the sublime.
So it's like beauty, but more intense, more awe-inspiring.
Well, it differs from beauty in a crucial way. With beauty, we experience harmony and pleasure. But the sublime evokes a sense of awe mixed with a hint of terror, as our senses are overwhelmed.
Oh, I see. So like standing at the edge of a vast canyon or witnessing a powerful storm?
Exactly. Kant analyzed how this experience points to something beyond our senses, connecting us to the realm of reason and ideas.
It forces us to confront the limitations of our own imagination. And how does this fit into Kant's larger system of thought? Where does the sublime lead us?
Well, that's a great question and leads us right into our next part. All right, so picking up where we left off, remember how we were talking about the sublime, that feeling of awe mixed with a little bit of terror?
Right, those experiences that kind of push us to the edge of what we can comprehend, like standing on a mountaintop looking out at a vast landscape.
Exactly. Kant analyzed how that experience points towards something beyond just our senses. It connects us to what he called it the realm of reason and ideas.
So it's not just about the physical sensation, there's a deeper intellectual and emotional component.
Exactly. The sublime forces us to confront the limitations of our imagination, and it plays a key role in Kant's attempt to bridge these two seemingly separate realms. Nature, which is governed by laws, and freedom, which is governed by reason.
I'm starting to see how these ideas fit together, but it's a lot to process.
It is. It is. So how about we shift gears a little? We've been talking a lot about big, abstract concepts.
Yeah, maybe grounding ourselves a bit would be good.
Exactly. Let's look at some of Kant's more specific writings, particularly his works on ethics and political philosophy.
Okay, so bringing it down to earth a bit, how do these ideas about freedom, duty, and reason play out in more concrete situations?
All right, so let's start with Kant's metaphysical elements of ethics. In this work, he digs deeper into the whole concept of duty, arguing that we've got two distinct types: duties to ourselves and duties to others.
So it's not just about being a good person in general, but recognizing specific actions we're morally obligated to take.
Precisely. Kant outlines several specific duties like, developing our talents, being truthful, helping those in need. He even talks about the importance of keeping promises.
Which, I mean, that feels incredibly relevant in our current world.
Totally. Now, this brings up those everyday moral dilemmas we all face, like, is it ever okay to tell a white lie if it means sparing someone's feelings?
Right, those tricky situations where it's not always clear what the right thing to do is.
Exactly. And this gets to the core of Kant's ethical framework. He'd argue that even a seemingly harmless white lie, it violates the categorical imperative.
Ah, right, because you're not acting according to a principle that you could universalize.
Precisely. If everyone started telling white lies whenever it was convenient, well, trust would erode, society would be a mess.
So for Kant, honesty is paramount, even when it's challenging.
Right, because by being truthful, you're not only acting morally, but you're demonstrating respect for the other person's dignity as a rational being. You're treating them as an end in themselves, not just a means to avoid an awkward situation.
Okay, I'm starting to grasp the logic here, but how does this emphasis on duty extend to a larger social context? Did Kant have any thoughts on politics?
He did. In his work, The Science of Right, he lays out his vision for, well, you could say a just and ethical political order. And as you might expect, it's deeply rooted in the principles of reason and freedom.
Right, that makes sense given everything we've talked about so far. So was he, like, advocating for democracy, individual rights?
He saw both as essential for a just society. A legitimate state, for Kant, had to be based on the consent of the governed, and it had to uphold the rule of law.
So power should come from the people, not from some arbitrary authority figure.
Yeah, absolutely. He even argued for the right to revolution if the government becomes tyrannical, oversteps its boundaries.
Wow, it sounds like Kant's political ideas were pretty radical for his time.
They were, and they had a big impact on later thinkers, especially those who developed theories of human rights and democratic governance.
Okay, so we've got morality, we've got aesthetics, and now we've even touched on politics. Kant's ideas were remarkably far-reaching.
Yeah, he was a prolific writer and thinker, and his work is still relevant today because, well, he grappled with questions that are just fundamental to the human experience. What does it mean to be free? How do we know what's right and wrong? What is beauty? What is purpose?
I have to admit, I was a bit intimidated by Kant at first.
Yeah, I get it.
But now I'm starting to appreciate him as this brilliant and insightful thinker, someone who offers a lot to think about, even if it's challenging.
I couldn't agree more. And that's what I love about a deep dive like this. We're not just passively absorbing information, we're engaging with ideas that can change how we see the world and ourselves.
And sometimes those challenging ideas are the ones that push us to grow the most.
Absolutely. Now, we've covered a lot of ground already,
Yeah, we have.
but there's always more to unpack in Kant's work. There are all these connections and subtle nuances.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Right. So, where do we go from here? I'm thinking we could circle back to the thing in itself concept. You raised a great point earlier about what it means for how we understand reality.
Yeah, that one really got me thinking. If we can never truly know the thing in itself, does that mean our perception of reality is, like, inherently flawed or limited?
That's a great question. And it goes to the heart of what Kant was trying to do. He wasn't saying that the noumenal world, the world of things in themselves, doesn't exist. Just that it's beyond what we can know for sure.
So even if we try to imagine what's beyond our senses, we're still stuck within the limits of our own minds.
Exactly. Our minds are like these complex instruments that filter and organize all the sensory data coming in.
But the way our minds are structured, with these categories like space and time, well, it shapes how we perceive reality.
Right. We can't just step outside of those categories and see the world as it truly is, apart from how our minds make sense of it.
So are we, like, trapped in our own subjective experiences? Is there no such thing as objective truth?
Now, Kant's response to that might surprise you. He argued that while we can't know the thing in itself with absolute certainty, we can still strive for objective knowledge, within the realm of phenomena of the world as we experience it.
But how's that possible if our minds are, like, shaping our perceptions all the time? Wouldn't that make everything subjective?
Well, Kant believed that even though our individual perceptions might differ a bit, our minds, they all share a common structure. And it's this shared structure that makes objective knowledge possible.
So there's something fundamental about how we think, how our minds work, that allows for a shared understanding of the world.
Exactly. Think about, like, the laws of physics. These laws describe how objects behave in the world as we experience it. Right? Now, we might not be able to know the ultimate nature of those objects, apart from our minds. But the laws themselves, they can be studied and understood objectively.
So even though our individual perspectives are filtered through our own minds, we can still arrive at objective truths about the world, at least as we experience it.
Exactly. That's one of the key takeaways from Kant. He's saying, essentially, that, yeah, we can't know reality in its purest form, but we can still strive for objective knowledge within the realm of human experience.
That's pretty reassuring, actually. It gives us some solid ground to stand on, even if we can't grasp the ultimate truth of things.
It does. And it leads us to a really important shift in Kant's thinking. The transition from his theoretical philosophy, which focuses on what we can know about the world, to his practical philosophy. That explores how we ought to act.
So even if we can't fully grasp the nature of reality, we can still make choices and live a moral life.
Precisely. Kant believed that the limits of our theoretical knowledge, they don't diminish our capacity to be moral agents. In fact, he argues that freedom and morality, they're rooted in the noumenal realm, the realm of things in themselves.
Wait, hold on. That seems kind of paradoxical. Are you saying that we're free because we're connected to a realm we can't even know?
It might seem counterintuitive, but yeah, that's the core of Kant's view.
Yeah.
He suggests that as phenomenal beings, beings who exist in the world of appearances, we are subject to the laws of nature. But as noumenal beings, we also have this connection to a realm of freedom, a realm where we can act according to reason and morality.
It's like we exist in two realms at the same time, caught between the world we experience and a world beyond our grasp.
It is. And for Kant, that duality, It's fundamental to our existence. We're both physical beings, subject to natural laws, and moral agents capable of making free choices.
And this brings us back to Kant's emphasis on duty. He seems to be saying that morality isn't about just following our desires or seeking happiness, but about acting in accordance with, well, a higher moral law, even when it's tough.
Exactly. For Kant, morality isn't about personal preferences or social norms. It's about aligning our actions with a universal moral law that transcends individual desires.
It's like he's raising the bar for what it means to be human.
He is. His ideas feel so relevant today, when we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to just follow our passions, prioritize our own self-interest.
Right, it's all about me, me, me.
Exactly. And Kant offers this powerful counterpoint to those self-serving narratives. He reminds us that we have obligations to others, and that being ethical, sometimes it means putting aside our own desires.
It's a call to something bigger than ourselves.
It is. But it also raises a question. How do we determine what this universal moral law actually is? How do we know what our duty is in any given situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. It can't be easy to figure that out.
And that's where the categorical imperative comes back in. Remember, it's that principle that helps us figure out if our actions are morally right. By asking, could I universalize this principle? Could I will that everyone act this way? We start to see what our duty is.
So if I'm wondering whether I should help someone in need, I should ask, could I will that everyone always help those in need? And if the answer is yes, well, helping becomes a moral duty.
Exactly. The categorical imperative, it's like this guide, it helps us move beyond our personal inclinations and act in line with a universal moral law.
I see. It's not about what I feel like doing, but what reason tells me is the right thing to do.
Exactly. Kant's ethical framework, it's challenging, but it's also really inspiring. He's calling on us to be more than just self-serving individuals. He's asking us to be moral agents who contribute to a just and ethical society.
To make the world a better place, not just for ourselves, but for everyone.
That's the key takeaway. He believes each of us has the capacity to act morally, and that our actions have a real impact. They matter.
Okay, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Metaphysics, aesthetics, ethics, even touched on political philosophy. Anything else we should explore before we wrap up this Kantian journey?
There's one more piece we haven't talked about yet, and that's his concept of judgment.
Judgment. I thought we've been talking about judgment all along. Isn't that what we do when we apply the categorical imperative or, decide if painting is beautiful?
Well, you're right. We've been using different forms of judgment throughout our conversation. But Kant had a specific way of understanding what judgment really means. He saw it as a distinct faculty of the mind, a bridge between our understanding and our reason.
So judgment isn't just about making quick decisions. It's a deeper process that connects our experiences with our ability to reason.
Yes. For Kant, judgment is this interplay between sensibility, our ability to perceive the world through our senses, and understanding our capacity to make sense of those perceptions.
So when we judge something, whether it's the morality of an action or the beauty of a sunset, we're not just reacting emotionally or relying on intuition, we're using both our senses and our intellect.
Precisely. Kant believed that judgment requires reflection and careful deliberation. We can't just rely on gut feelings or social conventions. We need to use reason to weigh different factors and arrive at, a well-considered judgment.
This makes me think of all those times in life when we're faced with tough choices, moral dilemmas, or even just trying to appreciate something complex and multifaceted. Kant seems to be saying that judgment is a skill that we can develop, a muscle we can strengthen.
Exactly. He believed that judgment is essential for navigating the complexities of human experience. It's how we make sense of the world around us, make ethical choices, and appreciate beauty.
It reminds us that we're not just passive recipients of information, We have this capacity to engage with the world, to shape our understanding of it.
You got it. And Kant's emphasis on judgment, it empowers us to be critical thinkers, responsible agents in our own lives.
Powerful stuff. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Immanuel Kant, what's the one key takeaway you'd want our listeners to walk away with?
I'd say the most important thing to remember is that Kant's philosophy, it's not just some abstract intellectual exercise. It's a call to action. It's a challenge to use our reason to make the world a more just, ethical, and meaningful place.
And that challenge, it's for each of us. We've explored some complex ideas, but ultimately it's up to each of us to figure out how to apply them in our own lives.
Absolutely. Kant's philosophy encourages us to be active participants in shaping a better future for ourselves and for all of humanity.
So as we emerge from this deep dive into the mind of Immanuel Kant, Remember this. The world is full of unknowns, but our capacity for reason and moral action, that's what gives us the power to shape our own lives and be part of something bigger than ourselves.
Well said. And remember, this journey doesn't have to end here. Keep questioning, keep learning, keep seeking deeper understanding.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.